Hello everybody. This week we only going to have one video, and that video is going to be on the registry. I'll also talk a little bit about application compatibility at the end, but most of this is going to be spent on the registry, which is essentially the underpinnings of Windows. It has been for many, many years, and that's both a good and a bad thing. The registry is a hot mess. It is thousands upon thousands of what we call keys. I'm going to go through all of this and show you what it is in a minute. But these keys there are duplicates all over. They are connected to each other in different ways, and it's very easy for keys to become corrupt or incorrect, which can eventually cause systems to become unstable and eventually maybe even crash. But the registry itself is just really a collection of settings, a huge collection of settings. And so once you get past what it looks like, because it is pretty scary looking at first, you'll realize it's really just a couple of text files here and there that you will alter to change the way different parts of the system behave. Okay, so let's go right in. Let's get to the registry, and then I'll start explaining what these things are. So the registry can be found if you go to the Start menu and type in regedit. Regedit is the go-to tool that we use to access and change the registry. So if I click on it, UAC should come up because this is a big deal. The registry is how your whole system functions. You can completely screw up your system, you can compromise your system and make it vulnerable to malware, or you could fix it all here, depending on what you do. So this is the registry. The registry is made up of 5 sections that we call hives. Why are they called hives? Because they're honeycombed. They all interact and connect to each other in frankly, a honeycomb is easier to understand than the registry and the way these things connect. But in any case, they're called hives. Each one of these has things called H keys, the hive keys. The keys, I'll open up the first one, classes root, to show you, are huge collections of folders that inside each of these folders contains specific settings. Each one of these is a key, an individual key. And each one of these keys has different types of data. I'll go through the different types in a minute. First, I want to talk about the different hives. We have 5 hives. We have the classes root, which is essentially settings or associations for all the different types of files that you can find in the system. So for example, if I have an MP3 file, let me go to classes root. If I work my way down to M, that was a little too fast. You're going to find that I have MP3 settings. This tells us, as you can see right here, associating. When we have an MP3 file, I double click on it. What program opens up? Well, Windows Media Player 11 opens up. What kind of content is inside an MP3? It's an audio. What type is it? MPEG. What's the perceived type? Audio. So very basic stuff, but it has to be somewhere, right? The system has to know somewhere that if I have an MP3 file, what to do with it. Well, right here, this is where it tells the system what to do here in classes root. Now, the thing about classes root is it's not really its own hive. It is made up of parts of 2 of the other hives, the current user and the local machine. So the current user and local machine also have these settings. So you essentially have 3 copies of the same settings potentially, all in here inside the registry. Does that sound efficient? No, it's not efficient at all. But that's the way it's been designed and kind of grown over the years. So that's classes root. You can tell that I'm not overly impressed with the construction of the registry. That said, it's incredibly powerful, and obviously it works really well, or Windows wouldn't have been around for as long as it has been. And honestly, Windows 10 is a pretty good operating system. So it does it right. It is just very confusing at first blush. It takes a lot for people to get into and understand where all these things are. But again, like I've been saying, once you figure out where things are, once you learn how to read this, it's pretty straightforward. So for example, HKey current user, that's exactly what it sounds like. Whenever a user logs in to Windows 10, all of their keys, which are stored here in HKey users, all of their keys get copied into current user. So then everything in here, these are the settings for this particular user, user X. It's just called current user right now because, user X is the current user. And these are all the different settings that this user has. So let's just go to system settings for now, see what we've got in here. Current control set gives us the different settings that are built into the system. So if I work my way down, we've got network settings, we've got network, and notice we have these different types of keys depending on how far we go. What do these things hold? Honestly, it's not that important at the moment. I'll show you a couple of these where we can see some of the changes, see some of the differences. But all of these settings, we'll look at the control panel settings, these are all the control panel settings, are specific to the current user. Every user has a copy of these keys. And when they log in, their copies get copied into the current user Hive. So just as a quick example, like I said, not all these have very obvious keys, but mouse is one that kind of does. If I open up the name here, you can see double click height, double click speed, double click width. These are the settings. What do these numbers mean? You know, we don't know. The easiest way to figure out what they mean is try changing them and see what happens. You may also go into the control panel, make changes there, and see how they get reflected here in the registry to get a sense for what these values stand for. But essentially, everything that happens in the system has a setting somewhere in the registry that corresponds, that tells the system how to handle whatever it is we are doing. In this case, the mouse or the keyboard. If we had international languages set up, this is how things get formatted, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that is the current user. Now, local machine is just like current user, except it is for the entire machine, literally this local machine. This is where information about all the different drivers in the driver database, here we go, the INF files, where they're stored. There's all the different INF files. If you remember from printers, INF, this is the information about individual printers and the drivers themselves. So I could probably go down and find that HP Universal Print Driver in there somewhere. So local machine has all the information about the machine itself, whether it's hardware like this, or whether it is the SAM, the Security Accounts Manager, System Account Manager, which handles all of the accounts on the system, all of the user accounts, the system accounts, so on, the security settings, the different software settings that we have for the local machine, and then system settings itself, whole bunches of system settings and how it works. You're going to see, again, as we look here, you're going to see a lot of similar and sometimes duplicate keys here, as well as in classes, root, current user, and the others. HKey users, this is going to list of all of the users. This doesn't look like it, but every one of these is a unique identifier for all of the user accounts that have been created on this system. So let me pull this out here. You can see, keep going. You can see how long some of these identifiers are, right? This is the one that is currently in use, which is why it has all of this added information to it. That's Windows' way of knowing that this is what's copied into current user. And there's a couple copies here. When I log out, all the stuff here is going to get copied back here. It's going to be turned into S1521 without all the extra numbers. And we'll wait until someone else logs in, and then it'll be their turn to be current user, and they will have all that stuff added on to the end. But all of these are individual user settings. Now, current configuration, the current config, this is essentially this is the current user folder for the local machine. This is how the machine is currently configured. Now, obviously this doesn't have all the hardware settings, but the software and system settings, these are specific settings to the current configuration. Obviously, I haven't done a whole lot to this machine to change the current configuration, other than we have set like specific software fonts, the current control set, which again goes into control panels and services and things that I have changed since I logged in. Notice I've worked on print stuff since I've logged in, and that's about it. So as I make changes, the current configuration will change and get bigger and bigger. Eventually, when I shut down, that's going to get copied back to local machine. So that is a really brief overview of what the registry does, of all the 5 different hives and what are stored inside them. Now, as far as some of the different types, let me just open back up the control panel and go to the mouse registry area. And you can see we have different types of keys. each one of these keys holds a specific kind of information. As you can see in this one, we have 3 different types. We have reg SZ, reg dword, reg binary. Registry SZ just stands for a string or a set of characters. In other words, no is a character, 4 is a character, so is 500, and so on. So this just has specific, what we call strings or characters, strings of characters, numbers of characters, words basically. Dword is a 32-bit number. So it's going to be something in hexadecimal that is 32 bits. So it should be 8 zeros over here. Binary is a set of binary data of any kind. So what these do is every one of these relates to a specific setting. So if I wanted to change this dword, if I were to, come on, get over here. If I were over here and modify the data, it'll pull up the key. This is the actual information on the key. Right now the value is set to 0 in hexadecimal. If I changed it to 1, for example, I might do something. Now that said, I'm not exactly sure what I would do. So I'm going to give you some advice. I'm fully support you wanting to go and change things, see how things work, and muck around in here. It's fun. It's how you learn. But before you do that, you should make sure that if you have a functioning computer that you back up your registry. Back up all the data, put it in a file somewhere on your computer, maybe even somewhere away from your computer in case you really mess it up, and have it so that you can always revert to your original settings that you know worked. So to do that, it's actually pretty straightforward. Go up to File here and Export. If you export, this is going to export, well, let me back up here. This should export the entire registry. So click on Export, and I pick, let's just put it on the desktop for now, I pick what I want to call. So I'm going to call it regback for registry backup. And I'm going to save it. It's going to take all of these settings, and it's going to save it in this file here. Okay, so now that it has finished, let's go back into the registry and try and change something, see what happens. So I'm going to go back into current user, control panel, mouse, and then here, active window tracking. So this dword is set to 0, so I've got a value of 0. Active window tracking, if I open this, I can change this value to a 0 or, let's do a 1. Actually, I'm kidding. So active window tracking is a technique that Windows uses that allows us to, if I hover a mouse over a window, it will bring that window immediately into focus. Right now, it was turned off. When I set it to 1, 1 is enabling window tracking. So right now, even though, so I've backed to my registry, so I'm fine. So if I reboot the system and then try and open up some windows, you're going to see active window tracking enabled, which it wasn't before. Every time you make a change to the registry, you will have to close the registry editor and reboot. Because when you reboot, all of these settings that you have just placed, they get reloaded into the system. Right now, these are just text files that haven't been used. These were the current settings. So I'll reload and log in as user X, and we should see active window tracking in action. Okay, so now we are logged back in. So if I open up a couple of windows, we will get to see active window tracking in action. Let me open up the registry editor again because I'll want to show you how to reload some of the backups that we have. So here I am. Notice the registry editor is up front. So I have access to the editor. I can move around here. If I bring my mouse over here, do you see how I'm actually interacting with the window behind the registry editor? I actually am now focused on the window behind this one, even though it is not in the foreground. That's what active window tracking does. It allows me to interact with the windows that are maybe not what was directly in focus just by hovering over it with the mouse. Okay, nothing very exciting, but we saw a change. Now, if I want to bring this back, say I think this is whatever I've done has screwed up the system. If I want to do that, I can, let me close that, I can reload the registry backup. To do that, I can go to File, and this time Import, and go to the desktop, and Registry Backup. Okay. Now it's going to go through and import the entire registry backup and then ask me to reboot. And then when I do, if we go back to active window tracking, we're going to see this is set back to the 0 value that it was when we first started. Okay, and so now that we have reloaded again, let's go take a look and make sure that we have recovered, yes, all of our settings. Yep, and there you see window tracker is now back down to 0 where it belongs. Okay, so that's an overview of the registry. That really, once you get the hang of looking inside these folders and seeing the keys and seeing what the values are, it's not so bad. That said, be careful and make sure you use backups before you start messing around with the registry. Okay, so that'll be it for that. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about is application compatibility. Now, application compatibility is something that's been around since Windows 7. And what it does is it allows us to run programs that were developed for older systems, previous systems going back even as early as Windows 95 and possibly earlier, on modern machines. There are a lot of issues because many things have changed over the years in Windows. Permissions have changed, graphics have changed, things like that. And so older programs just by themselves may not work. And so we have this, what we call compatibility mode, that allows us to run older programs on modern systems. So let's see what that's like. Well, let's get ourselves to an older program and then see how we can make it work. So let me go here to local PC, Windows. I'm going to go to System 32 where there's a bunch of older programs still stored here in the system. And I'm going to go to Write. Write, for those of you who have not had the pleasure of working with it, I'm going to make a copy of it so I'm not messing with the actual version of the program. We're going to put it out here. Write is WordPad. That's all this is. But it was called Write for many years before the whole Notepad, WordPad thing came around. So if I right-click on this older program, you're going to see Troubleshoot Compatibility is one of the options here. So I'm going to click on this, and then it's going to go through and try and detect a problem with the program. Now, it didn't find one immediately, so it's asking me if I just want to run what it thinks is the recommended settings, or if I want to troubleshoot. If I click on Troubleshoot, it's going to ask me what problems, like why am I trying this? I tried to run it, it didn't run. What happened? So in this case, we need additional permissions in order to run WordPad effectively or write effectively on Windows 10. So I'll select that and then hit Next, and it will change some permissions to what it thinks needs to happen. It says here, test the program. Let's make sure it works. So I click on Test the Program, and it's going to, notice UAC pops up underneath. Right, .exe wants to make changes. Sure, yes, we want that. And here it is. WordPad is now opened up, this old version of WordPad. Okay, so that's how you handle program compatibility. It's really, there's not a whole lot you yourself can do. If I go next, by the way, I'm able to save the settings or use different settings or whatever, depending on whether it worked the way I expected it to. So yeah, it worked. Let's save the settings. And then it'll keep looking to see if there are others. In this case, nope, there are nothing else. It was an incompatible program. It's been fixed, and I'm done. I can now use my Write program anytime I want. So that's pretty much it for compatibility settings, like I was saying. There aren't too many things you can do manually. Windows has certain things that it can try. If it gets complicated, too complicated for a simple troubleshooting tool, then you're going to have to go in probably to the registry and start making changes to the way Write is accessed. Okay, so that's it. That's all I wanted to do today. We spent a lot of time talking about the registry and then a little bit here about program compatibility. Hope you have a good week, and I will talk to you again next week.